Well, I didn't mean to hit record, but I guess we're recording. Hey, welcome back to the follow-up video on the attempt to use a nano lubricant on the Shopsmith Mark V. If you're new to the channel, and there are a bunch of you who are, thank you. Great to have you here. Just so you know, typically when I put out a video, especially if you're related to Shopsmith, I will often, within a few days, do a follow-up video to answer the questions, comments, and cheap shots that came up from that video. Doesn't always happen if it's just straightforward and there's nothing more to say and very few questions and there's not a follow-up video. When there is a follow-up video though, it remains live on the channel for about a week and then it becomes private content over on my website. If you haven't checked out my website, it's mygrowthrings.com. It's very straightforward. You can sign up for a free account there and it gives you access to chats. If you want to pay a little something, thank you very much. That gives you access to some of those videos. But let's dive into the questions. First, Peter asked, well, actually, Peter had quite a bit of comments and questions that he was talking about. So let me find the thing here. So Peter's question was about the tubes, my comment about how the tubes are never exactly true. And his first question, which is a great one, is then how is it possible then, even theoretically, to do alignment? That's such an excellent question. The thing is, it's a subtle bow that these tubes have in them. If you position them properly so that they bow up, then the assumption is made that, number one, the weight of the headstock carriage table is going to level things out a little bit. But also, if you're doing that alignment on a curve that is a gradual arc, and you're aligning your headstock and your table, saw blade, your table, that no matter where they're positioned on that arc, they should remain in alignment to one another. On the lathe, the closer your headstock is to the tailstock, the less tolerances you're going to see. The greater distance apart you position them, the more you would see that tolerance build up, which is why when I did my video on before you turn on your Shopsmith, I always, in the alignment of the base machine, which is essentially a lathe, I always extend that quill out as far as I can to get as much distance between the tailstock and the headstock that I can. And that would amplify then any errors that I might see over distance. But it's a great question. It's not a big problem. It's something that Shopsmith owners have not experienced issues with. If you were a machinist, if you were doing metal turning, for example, if this was a milling machine, then yeah, it's probably not going to be within the tolerances that you would expect for that. Another great question, and I think a few people ask something like this, and that is, doesn't the wax cause a problem with the locks? In other words, will it lock firmly with a waxed surface? Yes, assuming that it's been waxed properly. And this also goes to address some of the concerns I have for alternate methods of protecting the tubes. If you're using an oil-based lubricant, for example, potentially there's some slipping. So with wax applied and then buffed to where it's just a minimal microscopic amount of wax on the surface, doesn't seem to cause any problem with the headstock being locked, or the carriage for that matter. He goes on to mention that I said that my used machine that I have here has some dents in the tubes from somebody being a little bit over enthusiastic and locking it, but that he was doing some turning of some wet wood and found that the headstock had creeping, moving, whatever. You know, I don't know the answer to that experience. I do know if you're turning between centers that the drive center and the cup center or live center in green wood will start to work its way into that wood a little bit, causing the wood to become loose, which would give the impression that things have become loose as far as the headstock. I've never had my headstock creep. Now let me show you just real quickly. I've shown this before, but my advice on how tight is tight enough. Ow! Okay, so how tight is too tight? Let me show you. I've shared this in a few other videos, but in case you missed it, with the headstock loose, I can move the headstock along. I can move the headstock along the way tubes. I'm going to get it in the position that I want, and I'm going to tighten it to the point where at that point I'd have to apply a little bit of muscle. So right now it wasn't difficult at all to tighten. I personally go no more than a quarter turn beyond that. Some people take it a half turn. I guess it just depends on your grip. But to me, that's plenty tight. If you're feeling like you're forcing it tight, you're making it too tight. Several people mentioned products by the company CRC. They have some excellent lubricants. This is the CRC 3-36. I do use this in a few places. However, I don't use this on the weigh tubes or on the main table. I'm going to point you to the video I did on where I use what lubricants. You'll find that in the video description, and that'll explain that. One of my concerns is, as we use an oil-based lubricant, especially on the exterior of the machine, is that we're going to attract dust into that lubricant, which kind of defeats the whole purpose and even makes a mess out of things. But as I mentioned before, I don't want things to become loose that I mean to be tight. The other issue is I don't need any of that kind of stuff transferring onto my wood where it potentially could affect my glue joints or my finishes. Now, okay, I'm going to put some oil on my weigh tubes. Does my wood ever touch my weigh tubes? Well, not intentionally, but sometimes I lay things down there. There's a chance, but my hands touch it, and then my hands touch the wood. So, tried and true method, stick with the paste wax. Here, that theme is going to carry throughout this entire video. Have you tried a solid lubricant like Dry Slide? Again, I think I have something like it. Be right back. Let's see. This one has been renamed now. This is now called Glide Coat, but I do use this. Super Lube, there are places where I use this. T9, Boeing T9, there are places that I use this. But again, paste wax. Paste wax, it's like magic. Greg asked for some clarity on the tubes. He said, so I'm clear on this. Are you finding the straighter of the two poles, then rotating one to figure out how to make everything move smoothly? No, not exactly. Okay, so for example, I have a couple tubes here. If I were to lay these against each other, and let's assume that there's a little bit of a bow to these, and there no doubt is, I'm gonna rotate one against the other, and look at that, I can actually rock them, but I'm gonna rotate them until either I get a bow, that's pretty flat there. I can get this kind of at the midpoint between where it's concave and convex. Take my Sharpie and make a mark on it. So that is about the flattest point on that. Now, what I've just done is, if that's the flat point, I've now moved this so where the bow is heading one way or the other. So I have a concave and a convex side. But that's the flattest of the two. I can rotate this one against that now and find its straightest point, which is right there. Mark that with a Sharpie. What I did is I used that as a reference point, as a starting point, but typically what I want to do is I want to put this into the machine so that the arch side is facing up. So I can determine that as I put it in the machine, which side it is. That mark is going to go either to 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock. It may not make sense the way I'm explaining it, but that's how I start out. And then with it positioned with its high spot up on each, I'm typically rotating just one of the tubes a little fore or aft to get it into alignment. And I'll try it a few times. In the end, though, for the most part, you'll find that the tubes will be raised in the thing, and then it works. Walter said, thanks on the tip for removing the headstock. I'm in the process of moving, and this will we'll use the process. Just a quick hint to anybody who's moving their Shopsmith. I actually did a video. It's one of the earliest videos on my channel where I show some pretty great tricks that I learned working at Shopsmith, because they were constantly taking those machines in and out of vans and trailers as they moved around the country to do shows. And it's actually pretty easy for one person to load a Shopsmith in and out of a truck or a van or a trailer. So I recommend checking that out. He goes on to mention, as did Lori, that they both use bowling alley wax made by the company Butchers. And, you know, I've heard of them. I've never tried it, to be honest. And as I read the description on their website, they actually sell several different kinds of waxes, but bowling alley wax is one. I'm curious about this for people who have had experience with it. Isn't bowling alley wax a little bit, no, sticky's not the right word, but isn't it designed to provide some traction? I may be wrong about that, but I'm curious what your experience, if you use bowling alley wax, especially on Shopsmith equipment, what's been your experience? Mark had a question that relates to the dents in the tubes, and he was curious and had assumed, because his has dents in it, would he need to replace those tubes? You might be able to rotate them into a position where they don't cause you any trouble if they are causing you trouble. It's interesting, where they dent is actually not in exactly the same position where it glides. It's a little bit off to the side. So it may be that they're not causing you any trouble at all, but a deep enough dent will cause the headstock or the carriage to kind of stop in that position, almost like a detent. And so you can try rotating it, but severely dented tubes are easily replaced. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Barry said, I was trying to imagine the work that you did today and if you had a lift assist on the unit. Yeah, okay, a lift assist is a device that you can use to, it adds basically air shocks to help lift the machine into the drill press position. Or if you have the dual tilting Mark 7, you can add them to either end or both. And if you have that, you have these brackets, these, in this case, would be down at this end. Each one is held in place on a way tube with 4 bolts. You would have to loosen those 4 bolts on each of those mounting blocks, and then you could rotate. If you were taking everything apart like I did, yeah, it would add a bit of hassle to it, but I think I mentioned you don't need to take yours apart probably. So if you have a lift assist, I hope that your way tubes aren't rusty and needing to go into evaporust. Wood Turner 1954, great year by the way, the year that the Mark V was introduced, said that he was storing his Shopsmith in a garage that had moisture problems, and it resulted in rusty pitted bars if they didn't wax often. I tried an early version of a silicone-based polish and found that it kept them smooth. Unfortunately, it attracted wood dust. It was always a chore to keep them clean. Yes, exactly. That is what that will do. So thank you for sharing that. Boroscope, if that's their real name, said, I use Odie's oil products for my finishes. I have a partially used can of Johnson's paste wax the prior owner gave me, but when it runs out, I will probably try some Odie's wood butter or Odie's wax to see how that works. If I'm not mistaken, they're using beeswax and a few other waxes that are pretty soft. I'm not sure that you're going to get the kind of durability that you get from something like the carnauba wax that's found in Johnson's and tree wax and brie wax and others. But I'd love to hear what you learn. Tim said, why do you squish, good word, why do you squish the wax through the rag? I always just wiped it on and wiped it off when it dries. Am I missing something? I have several friends that use Scotchbrite. They'll keep a chunk of Scotchbrite down in the can and they'll apply it, and essentially they're removing it as they're applying it. Not a bad approach. But the idea is by squishing it through the rag, you're only applying a thin film, which dries faster, makes it easier to buff out, and prevents you from wasting our precious wax. It's a trick that I learned from Shopsmith demonstrators years ago, and it just works. And that's how I do it. A Scotchbrite question. When you use the Scotchbrite, did you rub them radially or along the way tubes? Better rubbing them the long ways for a smoother finish. And it's a great question. I did both. In order to make sure that I was getting everything clean, I went all the way around and around and around. In fact, if you look really close at a Shopsmith way tube, you'll notice that there are grinding marks that go around and around the tubes. So yes, I agree with you. I then finished up by polishing with the grain along the length of the tube in order to smooth things out as best I could. And did you use a fine grit to finish? Yes, actually, I went through a couple different grits. The finest grit, I believe, was 800 grit, or an equivalent to 8. I want to go look. Be right back. Yes, the finest grit was an 800 grit equivalent. So, yes, pretty fine. A couple people noticed that they went out to Amazon and saw that you can still buy Johnson's paste wax. That's right. One can is currently $159. There's one that's $161. Hopefully that comes with free shipping on Amazon Prime. I'm tempted to put some of mine on there, but I don't think I will. Okay, now this is an interesting one. Another possible product is Pledge Moisturizing Oil. I use it to clean my bicycle and boat trailer hardware. Okay. So you heard the word oil, so you know I'm not going to recommend it. However, I had a friend that had a show car that he would take to car shows, and he actually used Lemon Fresh Pledge to put his final wax polish on his car that he showed. He won all kinds of awards. This was a long time ago. I'm sure there's much better products for that, but you know, when I see the word Pledge in the comments, it doesn't shock me, but an oil or a Pledge containing oil, I think that would be a problem. Now, I believe that contains silicone, if I remember correctly, so that would be a problem in a wood shop. So, stick with paste wax. If you're still with me, I appreciate you being here. Yeah, these are weird. Stumpy Nubs would refer to these episodes as a yapping episode, and yeah, that's true. This is why I don't leave these videos live on the channel for long. Just a thought about coating. Did you also coat the inside of the carriage and headstock? Yes, I did. In fact, I was a little bit concerned about that if this didn't work, that I'm going to have this gunk up in the headstock and carriage. I don't want to have to take it apart to strip it. Turns out it didn't really do much, so I don't have to do that. Anyone have an opinion of lanolin? Lanolin with Miracle Spirits is a carrier. I know that it's absolutely bulletproof rust prevention. There's nothing better. I'll die on a hill that don't die on a hill. But not sure if there is any pros or cons to friction. The problems with lanolin, as other products, is it's soft. Lanolin's been used forever on machine tools. If you've got a metal lathe or a mill and you want to prevent rust from forming, you can put lanolin on it. It does a great job for that. But what we're doing here is we're essentially looking for a dry lubricant, and we don't want to have to come out here, clean all the dust and all the lanolin off in between uses. And so I don't think it's a smart, that's not the right word. I just don't think it's the right choice for this application. But thank you for mentioning that. You did make me think of Wild Root Cream Oil for some reason. Look it up. I wipe on some WD-40 on the way tubes every time I use the machine. Works great, to which I would say no, for all the reasons. For those of you who don't know, years ago, for 5 years of my life, I was a clock repairman. It's what I did for a living, full time. And well-meaning homeowners or their neighbors would often spray WD-40 onto the clock movement, thinking that would give it a little more life. The problem with WD-40 is it really truly isn't a lubricant, and especially on the brass plates of a clock where there's brass but it's lacquer coated, the solvents in the WD-40 would cause the lacquer to melt and then get down into the bushings and cause no end of trouble. Plus, it would gunk up my expensive ultrasonic cleaning fluid. So anybody who brought a clock into me that had WD-40 on the movement, I had a surcharge, and that surcharge paid for a gallon of my ultrasonic cleaning fluid. which wasn't cheap. So anyway, I still have that instinct in me to avoid it for, well, a lot of uses. I do use it occasionally. I got a can right over there. No, it's not over there. Got a can here somewhere, but I don't use it for a lot. Devin asked, and by the way, I'm taking a guess that maybe your username contains your name. Forgive me if I'm wrong there. But Devin asked, I'm sure it's been asked and thought of, but why not spray silicone or graphite? There actually are places on the Shopsmith and, in the Shopsmith and on the bandsaw and a few other places where graphite is actually the correct product to use. Spray silicone, not so much, although there are some places I covered in the lubricating video, but by and large, they don't really belong. The silicone doesn't belong because it attracts dust. Mark asked a great question. I can't believe it's taken this long to get around to this one, and that is, are all 4 tubes the same and interchangeable? The answer is no. The upper tubes are about 3/4 of an inch shorter than the lower tubes. And in fact, over time, different manufacturers of the Shopsmith, and Shopsmith has been manufactured by about 6 companies now, they've hit on the idea that since the lower tubes don't have any wear on them at all, that they can be made cheaper. And so there have been times in the life of this machine where the upper tubes got a better plating on them, for example, and the lower tubes did not, or the lower tubes got a more decorative plating that wasn't intended to be worn. We're going to talk about the tubes a little bit greater here in a moment. Excellent data on the tubes, so stick with me. Wordsmith 5183 said, that's 15 minutes I will never see again. Teary face, laughing emoji. Yeah, must be new here. Rawl said, your concrete floor is a most unlikely standard for flatness. Yes, it is. I knew better, but it was worth a try. I've never measured how flat this floor is. The straightness of the tube is really not that critical. It is highly unlikely that they'd have centerless, that they would have centerless ground them. That one process would add thousands to the cost. Well, no, that's not true. Up until 4 years ago, they were centerless ground. I found out they're no longer. And why are they no longer centerless ground, I asked. Turns out because 4 years ago, Shopsmith changed from the chrome-plated steel tube to a solid, no, not solid, for a stainless steel tube. So it is, I just said it's a solid tube. There's a tube with a hole in the middle of it, therefore it's a tube. It's not a solid rod, but the material is stainless steel. So as a result of that, they gained tensile strength, while at the same time they have been able to make the wall thickness slightly thinner, which reduces shipping costs and other things. But those are drawn, not drawn over a mandrel. The old tubes, though, since 1947, have always been first drawn over a mandrel and then centerless ground, but they don't centerless grind the stainless steel. And that one process does not add thousands of dollars to the cost. But anyway, interesting. Oh, he went on to say, I thought you had some interesting kind of nanotech lube. You know, the title and all. Sorry about that. Yes, I do have a nanotech lube that I was hoping to use and that failed and that I'm not going to talk about. I do have some applications I think that it will work on when it does, and I confirm that. I'll give you the name then. There's no sense in throwing them under the bus at this point because I was using it in a way that they had never marketed it or intended it to be used. So just hold your horses. Hey, so you made it through. Thanks for watching. I hope you appreciate that. I appreciate you sticking around. And because of that, you've earned this. Make it a great day. Did you see that? Oh, that's smart.